welcome here to the home of the undisputed champion and Ferrari's biggest fan, as we are reporting here from our home sweet home, of course, and we are having this race reaction to round 3 of the 2025-2025 FIA Formula 1 World Championship, the Japanese Grand Prix, which took place at the Classic Suzuka International Racing Course, but which obviously now will get some bad rap because of what happened during the race. Then nevertheless, we will tell you exactly how well we did in our super new fashion, especially how well our two race drivers, obviously Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, how well they competed here in Japan, which is basically the last round, obviously, of the Far East Asian part of the calendar, which you can see here to my right. We will take a look at the race result and we will especially discuss what we should have done in order to depart from here with a victory, because obviously we are not celebrating, which means that we still haven't won a Grand Prix this year. We won the sprint, of course, in China. That's a really great occasion, but I do believe we had a pace to win here. But again, we would have to perfect, obviously, our race, meaning the whole race weekend, not just obviously the Grand Prix on Sunday. We will also take a look at the Drivers' Championship. It's good to think that, for example, we haven't gotten disqualified, just like, for example, in China, right? So that clearly over here, we've basically, this is now the most successful race that we have done. So there are definitely some positives to take. We can also take a look at the Teams Championship and what exactly, it means at the moment. So what can we tell you? Obviously, during the practice, it was hard to kind of figure out, who had the ultimate pace. I mean, it kind of leaned towards McLaren, but it was basically proven, as we went to qualifying 1 and qualifying 2. But I believe that, we had the second fastest team kind of honors clearly locked up. But what basically, happened in qualifying, especially in qualifying 3, is that, Max Verstappen delivered an amazing lap, or rather a lucky lap. He was really on a limit, and he was able to pit both McLarens, right? Whereas for Charles Leclerc, he did a good, decent lap. It was good that he qualified ahead of the Mercedes, especially ahead of George Russell. So he was 4th for Lewis Hamilton, though unable to improve on the second set of the fresh soft tires in the qualifying 3. So when he did, that final run, it was almost identical, and he only lined up 8. So as a result, we split the strategy. In terms of the weather, we didn't have the kind of shenanigans of Australia, because obviously it wasn't raining. It rained before the race, not at the end of the race like in Australia. So, actually everybody could just start on the dry tires, right? So we didn't need the wets at all over here during the weekend, and as a result, most people pick the mediums, right? So the Suzuka, traditionally, you can also see, obviously, when I'm racing it, you do know traditionally it's a one-stop race, right? Because the tire degradation is relatively slow. You do also know, for example, so while the tire degradation obviously over here being slow, it means that you have only a one-stop race. You probably also heard, especially if you watch the race live, that the first sector was completely resurfaced, right? So there's a lot of resurfacing going on as we kind of push, because the new surface is more grippy, right? So the push, the reason behind the resurfacing is to make sure that the drivers can obviously, go faster, especially in qualifying, so that they can beat some of the lap records, which Verstappen did over here, but I was disappointed because we were only 3/10 behind, and I do believe that if Charles in particular maximized his fastest lap, he maybe could have challenged, for it as well. So why are we talking a lot about the qualifying? Because the race turned out to be more of a procession, right? So this is a classic circuit. Drivers love it, people love coming to it, but it's maybe that politeness, right? Especially when you are in the country that is famous for the polite kind of way of doing things. You don't want to say that, the track has some flaws, right? Because clearly with only one DRS zone, with a rather short straights, it is difficult, for you to go right behind, the driver, and also, for example, through the SS, there's really only one line that you can take. The cars are quite wide, so you cannot just, pretty much go around the corner like you can do, for example, in China, right, or on some of the newer tracks, which are obviously wider. So as a result, you can take different line, and especially if you have different tires, then it's significantly easier to overtake. You've, for example, seen at the start, right, we had all three compounds present, right? So most of the front runners started on a medium. Lewis Hamilton started on a hard. I thought that was almost a stroke of a genius, but obviously we either needed a safety car or we needed the change of the weather, right? Because then Lewis would basically be first, and if it started raining after the midway point of the race, when most of the front runners would have already swapped from a medium to hard or medium to soft, that would be my preferred strategy. Then he would be in a great position, a little bit like what happened in Australia. But the rain never came. The safety car never materialized because once again everybody finished over here. You didn't have any shenanigans, only that fight between Norris and Verstappen. So as a result, very clearly that pretty much the drivers stay as they were. So qualifying was even more important, because kind of where you qualify, that's where you finished, right? And the cars are very close to each other, so it proved to be the case that the DRS on the main straight is simply too short. Then you're going into a fast sweeping right degree turn, so difficult to overtake there. Whenever I was racing, that wasn't my favorite overtaking spot. It was either going into the hairpin. I was surprised that we've only seen a couple of overtakes, because if you get a really good exit out of the Degner and utilize all the energy, especially all the electrical power, you can then send it to the hairpin, especially on the inside or even on the outside. You can make the overtake there, or going into the final chicane. It's also possible. That's, for example, where I can, I have taken the lead before when I was racing. So, bit of a surprise that the real, obviously, F1 drivers were not able to overtake. But yeah, as it went, pretty much most of the front runners stopped around the lap, 21 to 23. They switched from mediums to hards. You had that one moment. You had basically Verstappen leading from Norris, from Piastri. Then you had Leclerc, Russell, Antonelli, and then Hamilton, who overtook Hajar, because Racing Bulls were obviously so slow. Tsunoda, who obviously was in a Red Bull, also was basically stuck there in the 13th, 12th place. So he didn't even make the points. But, the key point was that, yes, while Lewis was able to overtake on the main straight, it was clearly because, Ferrari is much faster than the sister Red Bull team. But then, once you were behind the top runners, basically, it would be really difficult to overtake. So the closest moment came in the pits, because some teams, including ours with Leclerc, we had a bit of an issue. Verstappen, with the Red Bull, because they were missing the two regular the first team mechanics, so they were a bit slow over there. So Norris, who was just 1.5 seconds behind, all of a sudden emerged almost side by side, but still a little bit behind Verstappen. But obviously on the exit, the reigning champion gave him no space. Norris ran a little bit wide, but no investigation. But that's as close as it got. Otherwise there was no overtaking. So very processional race. So that was a bit disappointing. But I do believe, that clearly with different strategy, especially using the softs. You could have noticed if you do, for example, medium to soft or hard to soft, it's also possible. At least you will have much of an offset, right? So what I don't understand is, for example, with Hamilton, why don't extend him to like 35, 36, his tires were fine, and then put on a soft tires. At least, maybe you would be able to overtake a little bit like what Sainz did, obviously, when he recovered from like 16 to 14, 13 place. At least a little bit, that would be the preferred strategy, but definitely we needed to maximize the qualifying, maximize the start, and then pretty much stay out front. So I would extend that stint quite a lot, to like maybe 35 at least, probably starting on a hard tire. But as Antonelli proved, who was chasing the title of being the youngest, obviously, Grand Prix winner, he also set the fastest lap, which I believe he might be, probably not the youngest driver to set the fastest lap time. He really wanted to win the race, because he won't have a chance anymore ever, because obviously when Verstappen won in 2016, he was also 18 years old, and Antonelli will be older next week. So that was interesting to see, especially because he was on a medium. So I'm like, why don't we extend it? It worked pretty well for him, right? But again, why do all the teams change from medium to hard, right? If you do medium to soft, the soft didn't suffer any graining. There were no tire issues, because obviously the surface of the track is so good. So I think that would be a better strategy. But sadly, not many teams used it. So overall, it pretty much finished as it qualified. The Ferrari team boss said that it could be qualifying championship. I do not believe it. I do believe it's a decent result for Ferrari. the biggest hole from the Grand Prix weekend so far, and I think we finished roughly 15 seconds behind, so that's better than actually last year from the lead. So lots of positives still to take, and we just have to keep working. We can definitely catch McLaren. Red Bull was maybe one off. And again, keep collecting the points. We shouldn't be finishing behind Mercedes-Benz, and very soon we will be fighting, maybe even the next 2 weeks once we go to much hotter tracks. Because remember, Australia, China, and also Japan were not that hot. Only sprint was, right, and there we were dominant. So who knows what's gonna happen when we go to the Middle East, almost at the end of April, at least at the middle end of the April. Temperatures could be in the 30s, right? So the track temperature could be very high, even though it's at night. That could definitely suit us because we do perform better when it's hotter. Hey, it's the team of the sunny boy, no wonder, right? So here, let's take a look at this beautiful Scuderia Retina IMEC, how it finished, why we won't be lifting this beautiful Grand Prix Winner trophy and getting this medal over here, the golden Olympic medal. So over here, so let me show you how the race finished. So here you can clearly see Verstappen winning from Norris, just 1 second in between. Piastri there, they had obviously some issues a little bit with the team orders because Piastri, it was his birthday, and I do believe he had a pace to win, and that's simply because he did a purple sector 2 and 3 in qualifying, not in sector 1 though, so that's how he lost the pole position, right? He was on a provisional pole before Verstappen and Norris pinned him to it. Then we had Leclerc finishing 4th, as we said, 5th George Russell, 6th Andrea Antonelli, 7th Lewis Hamilton over here. Bit of disappointing that he didn't get Antonelli when he was on a medium tire, he was on a hard, but clearly he couldn't keep up. Surprisingly, once Antonelli warmed up the hard tires. Isaac Hadjar finished 8th, so will it be the next driver to try the Red Bull? It's getting a bit ridiculous there. Alexander Albon 9th. Maybe Red Bull should go back to him because he is completely outperforming Sainz. And Oliver Berman, that's good for Haas, 10th place. His teammate Ocon finished only 18, so he's definitely, again, he definitely reminded everybody that he would like maybe that Ferrari seat in the future. So that's how it finished. Very big surprise that Verstappen won here once again. He won the last 4 races and last 5 because basically we didn't race here due to the pandemic. So he won ever since 2019. He's unbeaten here. Last time we had a non-Verstappen winner was in 2018. So he's kind of doing what I'm pretty much doing. So over here, let's take a look at the F1's Drivers' Championship. So Lando Norris regains the lead by only a solitary point from Max Verstappen. So 62 points for Norris. Verstappen second, 61 points. Oscar Piastri third, 49 points. I do believe the McLarens believe it's between them, so that's why they didn't challenge Verstappen that much over here. Next, fourth, we have George Russell doing decent job, 45 points, big in the mix. Andrea Antonelli, better performances, 30 points for him. But I do believe that 6th, Charles Leclerc, obviously Scuderia Ferrari fighting back there with 20 points. I do believe he will be overtaking Antonelli after Bahrain. Then we have 7, Alexander Albon with 18 points, and I do believe Lewis Hamilton, who is now 8 with 15 points, will be overtaking him after Bahrain. I do expect that in the Drivers' Championship we will be 5th. And 7th, I do believe it will be a bit difficult for Hamilton to overtake Antonelli unless we, of course, win. 5th and 6th would be great, and then Saudi Arabia we could, catch up with the top 4 and be back in the mix. 9 is Esteban Ocon, 10 points, 10 Lance Stroll, he had a torrid race. 10 points, 11 Nico Hülkenberg, 6 points, 12 Oliver Berman, score points for 5 points. 13 Isaac Hadjar, his first points, 4 points. He's now the standout driver, 14 Yuki Tsunoda, 3 points. We will see what he can do with the Red Bull, or in the Red Bull, I should say, as that cockpit now belongs to him in the Middle East. Hugely disappointing. It was a very, dual performance, for him. You could see the pain in his eyes, when he didn't even get a points. Racing on a home serve for a Red Bull. 15 Carlos Sainz, 1 point. That's the last driver who has points, and so far Pierre Gasly 16. Fernando Alonso finally finished the race 17. 18 Liam Lawson, 19 Jack Doohan, and 20 Gabriel Bortoleto. They have 0 points, so they pretty much are still waiting for that breakthrough. So that would be the drivers over here. So now let's take a look at the constructors. which are here. So McLaren leading with 111 points, good decent start to the season. You know, definitely we cannot let them run away, otherwise it will be difficult to catch them. Second, Mercedes 75 points. If they can have Antonelli being close to Russell, they could still push McLaren. Third, Red Bull Racing 61 points, all courtesy of Verstappen. I do believe Red Bull is for sure heading for the 4th place in the championship. We are 4th there at the moment with 35 points. And, you know, I would like after Bahrain, you know, that we would be very close to Red Bull. 43 points on offer. It's definitely possible to overtake, but hey, with 43 points on offer, we could have 78 points, you know, so it is possible. It would be great if after Bahrain we could be 3rd. Then 5th, we have Williams, 19.6, Haas, 15 points. So lots of points for these teams already. 7, Aston Martin, 10 points, all courtesy of Stroll. That's a huge surprise. 8, Racing Bulls, 7 points. Obviously, only Lawson didn't score so far in the Red Bull stable. 9, Kick Sauber, 6 points. And 10, Alpine, 0 points. Maybe some changes coming up at the Alpine. We will definitely see. But yeah, this is how it looks like. So this is how the race finished. And over here, you know, disappointment, huge disappointment, you know, for us. However, you know, I do believe that nothing is lost. Again, we are struggling here a little bit, but the important thing is that we finished on the points. We almost maximized our probably, you know, the current performance. More upgrades are coming, so I'm sure we as Scuderia Ferrari will be back on the top. You know, we did enjoy coming here to Japan. Obviously, didn't get the result that we wanted though, but we will be back. You know, here just in 7 days time, you know, when we start the first of the 9 races, which will be the Bahrain Grand Prix. And yeah, overall, I really hope that we can improve the qualifying, because so far the overtaking is becoming a little bit difficult. So we definitely, you know, gotta unleash that pace of the prancing horse so that we are able to qualify very high. And then we can control the race just like we did in the sprint of China, because that's how the Formula 1 2025 should look like, right? Of course. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed this race reaction. What a pity we cannot celebrate, you know, with the great national anthem of Italy. But yeah, so far it's a very interesting championship. We had 4 different winners, both McLaren drivers. Now the reigning, you know, champion Verstappen again, you know, showing that he's not gonna give you an inch. You know, he's going for that 5th successive Formula 1 world title, which only Michael Schumacher achieved, so I really hope he won't win. And obviously Lewis Hamilton also won the straight. Maybe it's a great sign of the things to come. Maybe it will be Leclerc's time, or you know, perhaps Hamilton can now finally, you know, win the Grand Prix as well. Definitely the first race of the triple header was a bit of an anti-climax, and there is much more action coming up, so definitely stay tuned. And Forza Ferrari, we can do it! We bit down, but we will definitely come back and fight for the Drivers and Constructors Championship. This is what we are aiming for. Forza Ferrari!